Hello everyone, welcome. My name is MJ Pestridge. Welcome to another flight simulation video. And today we're talking about crashes and how you can solve crashes in your simulator. We're going to be focusing on P3D version 5, but if you're an XPLANE or a Microsoft Flight Sim user, you want to check out the time code below in a minute where you can skip ahead because we're going to talk about the Windows operating system and your hardware, which could be at fault for the crashes you're getting. But before you do that, I want to say a disclaimer, two disclaimers. One disclaimer is the purpose of this video really is to help you solve your crashes without having to reinstall your flight simulation software or your Windows operating system. Okay, I want to avoid that. I believe that we can fix your issue without having to reinstall everything. So the first disclaimer is, though, if you have any pirated software on your PC, especially for flight simulation, then this video is not for you and you might as well click off now, because the help that's going to be given here, you've already stabbed yourself in the foot, really, because that pirated software probably does contain malware, spyware, trojans, viruses, you know, hacking things that can to get your details that can actually harm your flight simulator anyway. So if you've purposely put that sort of stuff on your system, then this video is definitely not for you, and I'm actually not going to help you, I'm afraid. So you might as well click off now. Second disclaimer is we're going in with the knowledge and foresight that all your drivers are up to date, your Windows is up to date on the latest build, and all your add-ons and your flight simulator have the latest patches, fixes, updates, hot fixes, just everything is up to date. So the very first thing I would recommend for anybody is to just go through all your add-ons and your flight simulator software and just make sure you have the latest running version, because if you don't, that could be the reason why you're getting crashes. And before you XPLANE users and Microsoft Flight Sim users click off, I want to quickly talk about hardware. Make sure you have the correct hardware for your flight simulator. It's minimum or recommended PC specs, because that, again, you could be really underpowering your flight simulator, and that could be why it's crashing. It just simply can't run on the hardware that you're trying to get it to run on. So with all of that out of the way, if you do use XPLANE, if you do use Microsoft Flight Sim and you're getting crashes, click the time code down below and you can head straight to where we actually talk about hardware and about the Windows operating system a little bit later. But for everyone else who is a P3D user, stick around. I'm going to get you back into your sim, running, flying, without having to reinstall anything. So, again, like I said, make sure everything's up to date and running, no pirated software, and don't go on the Lockheed Martin P3D website to look at the minimum or recommended specs, because they're totally wrong. Okay, the specs that you'll find on their website is basically so they can sell software. I don't actually believe that is the recommended or minimum settings. I believe it's completely different. So first off, P3D version 5, you know, doesn't actually crash. Okay, it's a well-made software. It doesn't actually have issues. The only thing it does have is its weather engine is in a beta. So if anything's going to make it crash, it's possibly could be that. If you remove that beta, if you just untick it and don't use it, you might find that you don't have any crashes, because a beta product, they're still testing it. There could be crashes. I personally don't use the TRUESKY until it moves out of beta, hopefully before the end of this year. Secondly, P3D version 5 is like 15-year-old code. It's from FSX. It uses the same ESP engine that Lockheed Martin bought off Microsoft, and so, you know, it's running with limitations. It was made on Intel and NVIDIA hardware. It was created specifically around the architecture of that CPU and GPU. So if you have a Ryzen CPU, if you have an AMD GPU, to be honest, you might find it's a little bit more glitchier, or it's a little bit more touchy to get going smoothly than if you were running it on an Intel or a NVIDIA. I'm not saying you can't run it on those other graphics cards and CPUs, but you might just find little graphical glitches, or it's not going to run as smooth as if it were running on an Intel. My personal specs that I believe that P3D version 5 needs in order to run smoothly with all the add-ons you want is, forget that 8 gig or 4 gig, whatever they say on the website, of RAM. You definitely need more than that. 16 gig is the minimum, I believe, for P3D version 5 to run successfully with your add-ons that you want to run. Don't forget, P3D version 5 is going to use so much memory. Your add-ons are going to continue to use more of your memory, and the more memory you have, then the more add-ons that you can add in, and it runs smooth still. So 16 gig is definitely my minimum, and like 32, 64 is the recommended. In terms of a GPU, now, again, P3D version 5 is a very heavy intensive on the GPU for VRAM program. So the more you can throw at it, the better it's going to be. If you're throwing 8 gig at it, you know, it's only going to go so far, I feel. You know, if you throw 11 gig at it plus, then you're going to go further. Or you're going to have less issues. It's going to run smoother, I feel. 8 gig for me, I believe, or 6 gig or 4 gig is just not enough to run a smooth with all your add-ons P3D version 5. Don't forget, this is the first sim where it's in DirectX 12 now, which means the GPU video RAM, or VRAM, virtual random access memory, is uncapped now. It's limitless. So the more you have, the better it runs. Okay. Previous versions to this, they used to actually cap off the GPU function, so it could only ever hit a certain limit, and then the architecture of the program had to be built within that construct. Now it's unlimited, so it has no limits. It will use all your GPU, and that is why people are getting all these hung errors, because it is using all your GPU and it's exceeding it, and then it's crapping out when it can't handle it, and then Windows is going, well, I'm not going down with the Titanic, I'm resetting the GPU so I don't get nuked, and it only gives it 2 seconds to do that, which is just not long enough for the GPU to recover from excessive use of VRAM. So there is a fix for that specific thing, and we'll get into that a bit later. But my point is, the more GPU the more VRAM in the GPU you can throw at it, the better it will run. So the TI cards of either the 1080, the 2080 are the best cards you can get for version 5, I feel. If you're not on a TI card and you're on the 1080 or you're on the 2080, then I feel I would upgrade to a TI card. That was my recommended setting, is getting a TI card or the 3080 coming out, because I believe that has 10 gig of VRAM attached to it. And the CPU, at the end of the day, they say this can run on an i5, highly possible, but to be comfortable, I would minimum is i6. I have an i7 myself, and I overclock it to 4.9 gigahertz. Basically, my recommendation for running version 5 successfully is it has to have a 4 gigahertz clock speed minimum. Anything below 4 gigahertz at its base speed is just not good enough. It's not fast enough for the program. Anything over 4.0 going up to 5 is exactly where you want to be with your CPU. So whatever CPU you can get that works at over 4 gigahertz to 5, overclocking or not, then that is the one you want to use. P3D version 4 was very different to version 5 now. So those, I believe, are the recommended specs to run it smoothly with loads of add-ons on. I'm not saying that lesser settings will not run this. I'm just saying, with all the add-ons you want to run and all the programs you want to have active with your P3D, then these are the basic, minimum or recommended settings. I have about 10 apps going when I run my P3D, plus all the landscape and airports and airplanes that I put into it. So it's very intensive on the PC. And one of the possible reasons for your crashes could be your lack of PC. Your PC just might not be good enough. So definitely there. Now I'm gonna switch it over in a minute to the screen, and we're gonna go through what happens when or how to figure out what your crash is. Now, one thing I would definitely recommend is going to your icon on the screen here, right, of P3D, right clicking and opening up the properties of the icon, and going to compatibility and making sure this is run in as administrator mode, and you disable full screen optimizations and click apply. That's your first thing to do. That's how you should run this program. And whenever you do run it, you should right click and run as admin anyway. Just get into that habit anyway. Now, obviously, if it's going to crash now for you, then there is a few things we can do. At any time you face a crash, and it doesn't really matter if it happens now, after you load, or during a flight, there's 3 things you should immediately do, okay? Now, if after you've done this run as admin, you've checked that all your add-ons are up to date, shut down your computer, open it up inside, and make sure that all the memory is set incorrectly, that all the connections to your motherboard are not loose, that they are all seated properly, and just make sure that there's no loose connections inside, because that could also be another reason why you're getting a crash. So that's one thing you could do. Now, if you've done all that and it still won't load, or it's crashing out on you, don't forget, down here at the bottom, if you add something new to your P3D version 5 folder, you have to OK it first before the sim will allow it. And what will happen is, sometimes on this splash screen here, your OK notification, or a notification for anything, might actually pop up behind this splash screen and not in front. And you could be sat here for 10 minutes going, man, why isn't this loading? Well, in actual fact, if you hover over your taskbar and you see that you have 2 little icons where your P3D icon is here, then actually you've actually got something behind your splash screen that needs to come to the foreground, and it's actually in the background, and it's waiting for your authorization. So like in this case, this is actually popped up in the foreground, but sometimes this does pop into the background. So clicking on that actually may be your only issue, and if it is, brilliant, you're away. If it still is crashing out, there are a few things we could do. Now, anytime you get a crash, there is 3 things, like I said, you should immediately do. First thing is, go into your task manager, open it up to your processes, and actually close down anything that is running to do with your sim. So that would be the scripting engine for GSX, ChasePlane, the sim itself, Navigraph Simlink, ActiveSky, anything you've got going connecting to P3D, just shut it down, close it down. The sim object, the SOD engine, don't forget about that. Absolutely shut it down. Now, sometimes the task manager, right, won't actually report all of what's going on here. I use Process Lasso, and again, I'm going to do a separate video on this, because this program, I feel, is absolutely essential for running P3D. Now, sometimes you'll find, if you scroll down, bits of P3D, even though you've shut everything down, you'll actually still find like bits of P3D open and running, even though you've already shut it down, and it doesn't show anything in the task manager, right? It's a little bit weird. Windows not reporting everything, I don't know, but you see it here. You can shut it down here, and then every instance of any connection to do with your sim has been shut down fully. Second thing to do is open up your event viewer. Now, I've already done a video on this. I'm going to leave a little icon in the corner. Go check it out. Basically, your event viewer is a log. Watch that video, come back, and that will show you how you can actually see. There you go, mine's just crapped out. This will actually show you how you, like, what was the error? What was the reason why it crapped out? Now, in my case here, it's an NTDLL error. So I'm just going to make a note of that, to be honest. NTDLL.dll. But yeah, note the faulting module path. That's the reason why your sim did not start. Also, just write down the exception code as well, just in case. But this tells you exactly why your sim crashed. But put that away for now. Third thing to do when it closes is restart your PC, okay? Because it might actually work the next time, and actually try it again. Try loading your sim again, even though you've gone in. Like, we're going to shut this down because mine actually just did crash now, so we're going to shut that down. We're going to close every instance I can find in here. That's there's no other instance now of running, so we're going to close it down. Now, ideally, you should restart and try running it again as admin as well. Because sometimes just a simple restart after you've closed every instance down will get it working again. Now, if your sim crashes again, we need to dive in a little bit deeper. If it does load up and it does work and it gets to the splash screen, great. If it doesn't mean it's your sim that's the issue. There could be another reason. So what we need to do first off is we need to bypass that splash screen, really, because it could be that is the reason why it's crashing. So if you go into your user folder, users on the C drive, and go into your app data, which is there, and then roaming, and then Lockheed Martin, you're going to find your P3D CFG file, okay? Now, your P3D CFG file is going to contain an entry. Scroll down to user interface and go to show scenario window, and you're going to change that 1 to a 0, okay? And then save. And basically, it's going to load in straight into a flight. It's not going to bring up the scenario screen. It's just going to load from here into a flight. And again, if it loads fine, great. If it doesn't, we can troubleshoot some more steps. Okay, so if it still isn't loading into this splash screen here, and you've bypassed this splash screen by editing that CFG file, you might as well edit it back to 0, or sorry, to 1, because it's not the reason we think it is. Then basically every time you try this, what you need to do is restart your PC with every step, and make sure that in Task Manager there isn't any other apps or programs running. So like Adobe Update Service, we can end that. Anything that's not necessary for this to run, we can end. So MSI Afterburner, we can end that. OBS, obviously, I've got to keep because I'm recording. But Origin, we can end that. It'll probably come back anyway, though. And that's about it. Now, another thing, oh yeah, this tweaking tool we can get rid of. Another thing as well is go into your settings and go into all settings, go into gaming and game mode, and turn off game mode. P3D version 5 does not like this to be activated. Turn it on when you're playing games, turn it off when you're flight simming. And hopefully we will have gotten this far. Now, if it's still not loading into either your splash screen, or if it's still crashing in a flight, there is one final thing we can do. We can troubleshoot. Now, again, we're trying to avoid lengthy uninstallations, reinstallations of both your Windows operating system and the simulator itself. But what we need to do is we need to actually find out, is it any of your add-ons in your documents folder? It could be one of these add-ons that are crashing it. Like I've got quite a few in here. I use the XML route for a lot of things, but it could be, obviously, it ain't going to be these XML ones, because I can easily just delete these off to see if it's this that's crashing it. And if it is, then I know it's one of these. But we're going to do something a little bit more drastic. You're going to need to do this. Otherwise, the other alternative is reinstalling everything, like uninstalling all your add-ons, uninstalling your P3D version 5, running a registry cleaner, and then reinstalling everything again just to get back to the same point that we're at now. Okay, so I really highly recommend moving files around, deleting files off, getting rid of, and making at least 60 gig of free space. So what we're going to do is we're basically going to install a fresh copy of P3D version 5 without touching your old copy. And what we need to do for that is we actually need to secure your installation. So there's 5 locations that we need to change the names of, and when we say change names, you can just add a 1 on the end, and that's it changed. Okay, just add a 1. So P3D version 5 add-ons in your documents folder, and the files folder in, again, your documents folder. That's the first location. Second location is going into your C drive, into program files, and there's a Lockheed Martin folder in there. Just turn that to a 1. What you're doing basically is you're protecting your installation so nothing will happen. So that's program files. There's also one in program data. So you can reinstall P3D in the knowledge that your original installation with all your add-ons are not going to be touched at all. They're going to be unharmed, and this is a lot quicker, trust me, than uninstalling everything and reinstalling, because some sort of things you have to deactivate and reactivate the codes. So this is going to actually skip that step. So now that we've done that, we're going to minimize all of this because we're going to come back to it in a moment. And basically we're going to reinstall P3D version 5. So as you can see, when we open up the P3D that we've just installed, you can see that it's an absolute default blank thing. But to be honest, if you go into your C drive or program files, you won't actually see anything there. So now the interesting thing about the reinstallation of your sim is, even by ticking the 1 on the end of in program files, it doesn't actually rebuild this folder again. It rebuilds all the other folders, and as you can see, they're all here, and it allowed me to run the sim, and it did it in program data, and it did it in the documents and folders one as well. It rebuilt the structure of all these files, but it didn't do it in the program files. It actually, like, that Lockheed Martin is nowhere in this list of files, and yet the sim still loaded and ran. So, but everything else is here. So if I wanted to put it back the way it was, all I'd have to do is delete off these extra folders and change that 1 to just a normal, and it would reload as normal. Now, in order to create the folder structure in program files like it's been repeated in all the other files, what I have to do is, even though I've run the setup, it's only installed the extra files. It hasn't actually rebuilt the program files, but obviously, as you saw, it still allows us to get into the sim. But all I'd have to do is install the client, the content, and the scenery, and running them 3 will create this folder here, this extra folder here. But for these purposes, this isn't needed. Okay, so all we need to do is see if it runs. Now, if it runs, which you just saw, it loaded up just fine. What we can now do is go back and we can actually delete all those files that it's just created. We don't have to uninstall anything because it didn't actually make like a separate installation. It just gave us like another, but it hasn't actually installed into the system if that makes any sense. So all we have to do is go into those 5 locations where we where the extra folders popped up, and delete those off, and our original installation will return. Now, if it loaded for you, great. You know it's one of your add-ons now that is crashing it. And all you've got to do now is go through each add-on to determine which one it is by trial and error. You know, delete one, see what's what, or remove one, see if it crashes still, keep removing. So if it's still crashing your system after this test flight, and you've deleted all these folders, and you've completely deleted the test one off because it's still crashing, there's extra steps we can take to see about the crashing. If it hasn't crashed, well, if it hasn't crashed, now you know it's one of your add-ons, and you can simply just go back, start deleting or start removing add-ons until it does work. And then when it does work, you know you found that one that's the fault, and you can either remove it or deal with it. But if it's still crashing, there's other things we can do to test to see. Now, don't forget, we have the faulting error. We can actually look that up and sort of see what is it about that NTDLL, for me anyway, but for you it might be a different DLL. Now, the one thing I'd say about DLLs is when you go searching on the internet, right, and you type in the actual error. So for me it was NTDLL.LL. I'll put error, and I'm also going to put P3D. Now, I would say never ever go to any website that does not say P3D or Microsoft or Avsim, right? If it says something else like Reddit or Wikifixes, like, I'm not targeting this one particularly, but any other website where here, so this one's Orbex, so we can go there because that's a flight sim site. We can go to Flight Sim Labs because that one is relatable. Aerosoft is fine, PMDG is fine, VATSIM is fine, AvSim is fine, and obviously P3D itself is fine. We can actually go and try all these. Now, sometimes you'll actually see a little box up here that'll tell you what your error is. And if we actually typed in just the DLL itself, it may, there you go, the NT-DLL error you've receiving could be just a one-off temporary issue, and a simple reboot may resolve the problem. Now, for me, when that did come up, I did reboot my PC and my flight sim came back online and it was fine. So this was a one-off, no problem. But if you get the kernel base error, well, now you can actually go and start investigating it, but only investigate it in flight sim forums or Microsoft website itself. Never download a file from any other website, because these are DLL files. These can actually run, you know, viruses on your machine, and you could be duped into getting the wrong thing. So this case, it was a kernel-based DLL error. I'm gonna show you how to sort them out later. And this guy is saying to install, I formatted Windows 10 and the simulator and everything else to find a solution. Wow. He's got an update. It started when he was flying in Orbex. Of course, unfortunately, kernel-based DLL is nothing to do with any flight sim add-on or the flight simulator itself. Kernel-based is actually a system operating system error, and I'm going to show you how to tackle them in a moment. But yeah, only ever go to places like this, because otherwise you just don't know what you're downloading. You know what I mean? More likely than not, you'll find the fix in the P3D forums themselves, and it will actually be here, and you'll go, oh, there it is, right? Okay, now I know how to sort it, right? But yeah, just never download off a dubious website. Anyway, moving on. Okay, so we're still getting crashes, right? Well, okay, there's a few things we can do to sort this out. First thing I would recommend is opening up a command prompt, CMD, okay? Now, you might not have to go through all of the steps, and run it as admin, by the way. You might not have to go through all of these steps that I'm about to do, but going through them one by one will ensure that you don't have to reinstall anything. okay? Because Windows 10 is actually really good. It's really good at fixing its own problems as well. So if we type in CFC, or SFC, sorry, space / skip. Ooh, hello, there's the sim. Sorry, bud, just got to close you down. Thank you for restarting now. / scan now. What's going to happen is this is actually going to scan your entire system for any file, for anything that is out of place, for any Windows operating system that is out of place, and it's going to fix it for you straight away. Like, this is how cool it is. Now, sometimes it might find that it will produce an error, or sometimes you'll find that it doesn't, but just let it run. It's might take some time depending on the speed of your system, but if you've got a decent PC that's good enough to run P3D, it should actually only take like 2 or 3 minutes. But it's actually you don't have to do anything but click enter when it's completed, because it will actually fix it like without even asking. It will just do it if it finds any files out of sorts. So we're going to come back when this has actually run its course. So as you can see in this case, there was some errors here. Windows Resource Protection found corrupt files and successfully repaired them. So we can now close this down and restart the sim to see if it worked. Okay, so after the scan, make sure you go to Windows Update, just make sure everything is up to date. And the next thing I'd say is head over to tweaking.com. Now, the link is in the description below for this website, and in particular, their free Windows repair tool. Now, I had a major problem recently where my updates for Windows were not actually updating. Like, I couldn't get this updated for love nor money, right? It just wouldn't update. It kept erroring. I'd highly recommend getting this. It's absolutely free. Do not need to buy it. You just click one of these downloads here to get the installer, and you install it, and it comes up with this program here. Now, this program is what really helps me clean up my system when I found out that actually I had a few errors on my system. And this, once you install it, and it's perfectly fine to install, it doesn't cause any ill health, will always load whenever you start Windows. In fact, it's also a brilliant way to reboot your PC into safe mode without having to go through the laborious task of using that troubleshooting menu that Windows 10 does. But you just go to step 1, you go to step 2, and you go through these steps here along the way, repairing your PC. Highly recommend this program. This actually sorted out some issues on my PC that I didn't even know I had until my sim started to crash. And of course, it will load from default whenever you start Windows, so just clear that off. Now, if you've updated your Windows completely and you've run this tool, all right, you've looked up your DLL and you've actually removed your reason. And now, if it's a kernel-based DLL error, that is the most common old age one from the past. I have had that myself for 4 days until I realized my FSUI PC was not up to date. I didn't get an email about it. I just didn't know it had been updated. And as soon as I updated it, that kernel-based error went away. A kernel-based error basically means you have something wrong with your Windows 10 operating system. Okay? A kernel-based DLL means that there is something wrong internally between the software and the hardware. Now, it could be anything, right? So a few simple things to do to sort of, get away from is if you go into your, uninstalled program file list and look for a list of C++ redistributors, right? And you'll see them here in a long list, right, from here to there. Basically, click on each one in turn and go to change. Click change. Obviously, it won't be in Chinese for some reason. That one is languaged in Chinese. We'll click another. So it's in English. There we go. And you just click the word repair. I'm not going to do it now because obviously there's nothing wrong with mine, but go through each one of these, because sometimes it's these that get monkeyed up, and not through any program that you've installed or for any reason. It just could literally be you turn on your system one day and these are, you know, whatever. So go through each one of these in turn and repair it, and it will automatically repair it itself. Another thing I did as well is I updated my Java environment. I downloaded the Java platform, both the normal update here, which is number 8 for my system. It might be different for yours, and then the Java runtime environment as well. I installed both of them, and I also installed this little handy tool here, which is a great notepad to open with. It's called Visual Code, and it's basically a notepad, but it is a really good one. Install that and install Visual Studio Community as well, which you'll see both of these installers here. Now, I'm not even sure if these two did anything to my system, but having them on that system removed the kernel base error right when it was coming up, and I don't know why, but it removed it and it's fine. Another suggested thing is to reinstall your graphics card driver, and if you get DDU, right, the display driver uninstaller, that will actually remove it properly for you, rather than you using the installer or the reinstaller. So you have to do it in safe mode. You reboot your PC into safe mode, you uninstall your graphics card driver, and then you obviously, which you've already done, downloaded the latest one, which I did already, and then installed that one on top, and again, everything was working fine. Another thing you could try and do as well, rather than have to reinstall everything, is just repair. So on P3D, for your content and your scenery, you can actually just click the repair button up here, and it'll actually reinstall just your scenery or just your content, without having to reinstall stuff, and it won't touch your add-ons whatsoever. If you do it to the academic or the professional, the 68 gig version, I'm not sure what would happen, because I didn't do that. You don't have to do that, but I didn't do that. But I mean, at your own risk, really. But doing it to the content and the scenery is really all that was needed. And honestly, it was working fine. That's what actually fixed my kernel base error. I'm not sure which one of those exactly fixed it, but doing it in steps and restarting your PC, I would say, is your best bet, because kernel base, again, is nothing to do with P3D. It's the operating system error, and if you've got a single file out of place in your operating system, you'll get a kernel base DLL error. And I highly recommend getting the tweaking.com Windows repair. But whatever you do, just, you know, don't download, like, apart from tweaking.com's Windows repair, don't just download random DLLs from websites, because you don't know who's packing in what with that DLL, and you just don't know. So that's it, really. That's basically addressing all the crashes. Now, if you've got, the final thing I would say, the device hung error, that's your GPU crashing. Like I said before, it's your GPU being reset by Windows, and in my Discord there is a link down below. There is a fix for that. If it doesn't fix your PC, it means that your hardware just isn't up to it anyway, and nothing really will fix it. You're gonna have to reduce your settings right down to like low in order for it to run, and the only way you can get into your P3D in order to do that, to bypass the crashing, is to turn your scenario splash screen to 0, so it bypasses and goes straight into the sim, and then get into your graphics settings and turn everything down. Saying that, you can also change it in your CFG file by turning things to 0. and then loading it up, and it should load. But the device hung error, if you jump in my Discord and you scroll all the way down to the bottom to free flight sim assets and then scroll all the way up to the top, you're going to come to something called P3D version 5 reg fix, which looks like this. And it's something about TDR delay, and this reg here fixes that. It will actually increase the delay that the Windows gives your GPU 8 seconds, right, rather than the 2-second default. It'll change it to 8, which gives your GPU a little bit more time to sort itself out. And it's honestly, it's easy. If you want to see what actually this contains, you can right click and open with Notepad and you'll see what it's actually changing. There's no virus in here or anything like that. But to be honest, there are other things I've got in my free flight sim assets that actually helps you with your flight sim anyway. And I highly recommend going through it all. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. And you know, if you still having crashes after going through all of these steps, mate, turn your computer into a potato and eat it, because ain't nothing gonna stop a crash if you haven't been able to resolve it through all the steps that I've gone through in this video. Like, I've gone through every single crash, and if you're still getting crashes after this video, mate, flight simulation just ain't for you. All right, guys, take care. Thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you in the next one.